Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jenn, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in. Hello, my guest today is the talented California-based musician and Kirtan artist, Joss Jaffe. Hi, Josh, and welcome to Curito Connects.
Hey, Jen, how's it going? Great to be here.
Very good. So, growing up with a yogi mom, Josh was introduced to the world of yogic philosophy, mantras, and meditation at a very young age. And in 1998, at the age of 17, Josh traveled to India to study classical Indian music. He will share with us how his experience brought many learnings to him, in which he incorporates into his music today to spread around the world, because sharing music, particularly Kirtan music, where the audience joins the format of call and response, is a very powerful way to connect with our souls. So without further ado, I will let Josh introduce himself to our audience today and take us on a lyrical journey in which Kirtan music is so healing and why he wishes to share more of it with the world.
Wow, what a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much, Jen. I hope you're going to ask me questions so I don't have to just like do a monologue here. But when I was a little kid, I did do the theater, so I could do this like whole monologue thing. Once upon a time, in a land far away, in a galaxy far, far away. No, just kidding. I am a kirtan artist, but I also play a lot of different styles of music. And kirtan is a really cool style of music that originally comes from India. And it means singing together, right? So a lot of times with music, it's performance based. So the singer will sing or the instrumentals will sing, and then the audience will just listen and absorb that, and that happens in India too, in classical music. But kirtan is really cool because it's like this interactive thing, right? With the call and response aspect of it, where the leader will lead, and then the audience will respond. And so it's coming back and forth and back and forth. And so it's this very interactive thing. Here in the United States, we have gospel music, which is similar to that. A lot of people have compared the two styles of music. And, traditionally around the world, the music is very participatory. Folk music around the world can be very participatory. And so kirtan is this really great way of doing that. And it's also connected to the whole yoga tradition, right? You were asking me that earlier when we were talking. And yoga informs kirtan in the sense that yoga has mantras, right? The Indian spirituality has these mantra practices that are based in meditation and the yogic philosophy of India. And so when you're singing these kirtans, sometimes it's like a song that's called a bhajan, but the kirtans are just like a little mantra or a little fragment, like Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. And then the audience would reply, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. And it almost doesn't matter what it means exactly. I mean, it does obviously matter what it means, but it's the act of doing it. And that's what's called bhakti. And so bhakti is love of devotion, a devotional kind of love. And so through chanting these words, whatever they are, you kind of work up that feeling of love, and everyone feels this like good groovy vibe. And it's just a very wonderful thing. It's very unique. A lot of times I'll be doing it for people who have never done it before. I just got back from a tour in Asia. I was in Vietnam, Japan, and Hong Kong. And I would have people raise their hand if they'd ever done it. And like about half the audience, most of the time, had never done kirtan ever before. It was totally new. And it was like really fun, because it's just so participatory. People sort of let go of their inhibitions. Everyone's doing it. And it's also cool because it's this language that nobody really speaks, right? So most of the chants are made in Sanskrit, which is an ancient language of India. And Sanskrit is it is spoken vernacularly in a few tiny, tiny, tiny places. I've actually heard it spoken vernacularly in Varanasi, India. So there are still a very, very few people that use it, but in general, it's become like a liturgical language, like Latin or something like that, right? So it's like it has all this meaning, it has all this context, and yet it's kind of abstract in a certain way. You can just sort of like, have it be this experiential thing as opposed to like looking for meaning in it. And that's what's so interesting. I'm getting kind of esoteric here, but like I feel like in this time that we are right now, 2024, there's just so much, like everything like is just so much meaning in everything, like the all the technology and everything. It's like your brain is always on high alert, right? And so one of the things I love about chanting this is that your brain can kind of shut off in a way, you know and we really need that. Actually, we really, really desperately need to stop this sense of urgency of all these things, of finding all the patterns and everything in the world, because our brain is very good at doing that. It's almost too good at doing that, and what we really need to do is just turn that all off and just experience things. You know what I mean? And so chanting is a really good way to do that. Like you clap your hands, you can sometimes get your body moving, and then you're singing. And they've done all these studies about singing, and singing is this incredibly therapeutic thing to do. You know what I mean? Because you breathing, and you talked about yoga. So pranayama is another aspect of yoga, the breathing exercises, right? So, and that's inherent in singing. When you sing, to sing in first you have to take a breath in, and then you sing your note with that from the breath. So your breath kind of times with the singing. It's very similar to yoga. When you do the yoga asana, you're breathing and then moving and breathing and moving, and so it kind of like creates this like um, it's both an excitation response and a relaxation response. So you're kind of getting excited and relaxed at the same time.
Mm.
And that's one of the wonderful things about music, is the way that it does all these things to your body. And so I was talking about the science behind it, and there are these things that happen, like dopamine is released, serotonin is released, cortisol is reduced, stress is reduced. So singing is actually, I mean, they're probably going to start prescribing singing in the
I
health
wouldn't be
clinic
surprised. I wouldn't be
or
surprised.
whatever. So that's kind of a long way of explaining this, in a sort of a modern way, but it's also very ancient. And the practice, you don't need to know any of these things that I'm expounding upon right now. I mean, you just need to go in and just try it, and
Just experience it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that's kirtan. And then from there, I started that very young. My mom was a yoga teacher, and taught me about this when I was quite young. So that chanting music was like in the house, I would hear it. I would hear the chanting music and the mantras and stuff like that, but that wasn't the only style of music I listened to. I also really
Oh,
loved reggae music. I grew up in Southern California, like a beach town, so reggae, you would hear reggae music, almost like living on an island or something. So my first actual album of mantra music was called Dub Mantra, and dub is a style of reggae. And so I was mixing the reggae with the mantra. And so I have 3 albums of that, Dub Mantra, which is really fun. But I've also done electronic music and pop music and all different kinds of world music. I play many instruments. So for me, it's just like about connecting with people as in any way possible. And like sometimes you sing in the language that somebody knows, like English, or sometimes you sing in Sanskrit, that nobody knows. and and you just get to experience this musical experience. So that's my introduction.
that's your introduction. Well, you just gave us a 101 class on Kirtan music, and that was very
I
interesting and very
do. I do teach.
well versed. I wanted to ask you, growing up, so you were saying how your mom was a yoga teacher, and I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit as to how your mom was exposed to yoga and how that really was brought into the home for you growing up.
Yeah.
as a like you said earlier, your mom was a yoga teacher, and you would often listen to these kind of kirtan music at home. How did that influence you? And then at what point did you think, I just love music so much that like that's what I want to do with my life? Or did you always know that you had a thing for singing, or I feel like sometimes from a young age, or was this something more like you weren't sure what you wanted to do, but hey, I could play musical instruments because I played around with it growing up with mom and your family.
Well, that's a lot of questions there. I think that the thing that is most attractive to me about those questions that I think is very funny is when I was a kid, I just remembered right now that I used to love Michael Jackson.
Okay.
And I remember I would just like dance to Michael Jackson, and we would play it. And so, he was kind of the first I remember musician that really it was like, wow, he is so cool. And I was quite young, like 8 or 7 or 8 or 9 or something like that. So I was a child of the '80s. But yeah, when I was 9 years old, my mom told me and my brother that we had to play a musical instrument, and we could choose any musical instrument. We had to play it. And so I chose electric guitar because I thought that was the coolest instrument. And so I started playing when I was 9, and it was really very difficult. I remember it being like the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. My fingers were hurting and everything was hurting. Um, but I just kept at it. And many times I actually would thank my mom. This is many years later when I was much older. I'm like, thank you so much for forcing me to play the guitar. Because I complained so much when I was a kid. Oh my God, I was like not having it. And then at a certain point, there was a moment I remember. I can't remember the exact moment, but I remember the general feeling when I'm like, you know what? I can do this. This is something I can do. And it started making sense to me. And I was pretty young at the time, like maybe 11 or 12, something like that. And I'm like, you know what? I can do this. And there's something clicked in me, and it was the first time that had happened because like I wasn't like ever into sports or like, or like really a lot of different things like that. I was kind of shy as a kid, I didn't have like tons of friends or anything. But music was just like, whoa, this is going to work. I remember that. And then, so then this whole progression happened, right? You're asking about how it developed. So when I was 13, I got a bass guitar, and the bass guitar is the lower guitar. It's like, do, 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 and I really liked that. That was really fun. And then somewhere around then, I got into reggae music. I don't know how, but like I fell in love with Bob Marley. And I was watch these videos of Bob Marley and the way he would play the guitar, like the chick chick chick. It was almost like a drum the way he was playing the guitar. It was like a rhythmic thing, more than like a soloing thing. It was like he was playing it very rhythmically, and I kind of keyed into that. I'm like, whoa, he's got such good rhythm, and I'm like, that's so cool. And I started wondering about this whole rhythm thing, like what is rhythm? And so very soon after that, when I was 14, I remember I started playing drums. I wanted to learn how to play the drums. And then very quickly after that, so my mom, you asked me about being the yoga teacher. So she was like a hippie. My parents were like hippies in 1960s in California, and part of that whole hippie movement, which is cool. A lot of people like to hate on hippies now, but the hippies were cool. They were all about peace and love, and we need more of that in this world right now. So the hippies were cool, and also like opening up to different cultures and different, spirituality from different cultures. A lot of stuff from, the East, like India and Eastern spirituality, became. Interesting to people with people like the Beatles, the Beatles that were collaborating with these different world artists. And, so there's a lot of cool stuff happening in the 60s. And so then in the late 70s, my mom started doing meditation and doing yoga. And then I was born in 1980. And so this music was like in the house, like I was saying. And so then they would take us to these chants, and I was like, where they were singing the mantra chanting in these groups, these like informal groups, and like in people's houses, like house kirtans. And the coolest person to me in that whole environment was the drummer. I was like, because I felt like the drummer was really driving the whole thing, and so then I asked if I could like be the drummer. And I was young. I was like 14, 15 years old. And so I like tried to do it, and it was really hard actually. I remember it being like really difficult, and it was like if you messed up, like you messed up the whole thing because everyone's like depending on you, to keep it going. And so I was like, oh, this is a big deal. This is hard to learn. So, and then very shortly after that, I started running into these real teachers who really knew about this stuff. One of the guys' name was Montino. He was a very cool person who had studied sarod, which is an Indian instrument. He was a master musician. And then soon after that, I met a man from Nepal named Homnath, and he was a teacher at UCSB, at the university of the town I lived in. And he and I became friends, and he started teaching me a drum called the tabla. And the tabla is the drum of India. So I'm like, wow, this is so cool. And that just like totally changed my life. It really opened me up to this whole other world of music. And then he invited me to come live with him. And I was 17. So I was quite young. And I went there, and he taught me in this kind of old traditional style where I'd like wake up at 6 in the morning, practice, and then practice really hard, and then drink some tea, and then take a lesson. It was like all day music. And you got to remember that was 1998, I think. So no cell phones, no internet. just like practicing hard. They call it riyaz. Means practice. And so I was there in Kathmandu, Nepal. I turned 18 in Nepal, and I was there for 4 months. And that just blasted me off into that world of music, and there was no looking back at that point. And when I came back to the United States to go to college, like I already had all these skills on the drum. And very shortly after that, I got invited to be on my first tour. I toured with a man named Dave Stringer, and then I met a man named Jayu Tall. And so these were people that were like founding people in like kirtan music in the United States. There's a number of people like Krishna Das, and it's a small community. It was a very small community back then. It still is. And I played drums with a lot of these people. And there would be bigger yoga events, and it just sort of like grew from there. So that's kind of the story. It's kind of a long and winding story, but that's what it is.
Well, that's kind of cool because basically you just went to Nepal, studied really hard, came back, and then the path of alignment just happened in front of you. You just kept meeting one after the other of these
Exactly.
different individuals who then you played for, and then you got the
Hmm.
next gig and the next gig. So throughout that decade or two,
Uh-huh.
did you just keep kind of going with that flow? Like, I guess my question to you is, was it more like, okay, I have these talents and I really enjoy doing this and I'm just going to play for other people for their concerts, etc.? Or
Mm.
was there a point where you thought, okay, how am I going to make this a living?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I had a really, really, really good friend when I was a teenager named Tobias, as he's still my very good friend. And he was like a prodigy. He was like a prodigy on the doumbek, which is a drum from Persia and the Middle East, an Arabic drum. And he like really became very good at that drum, and they started flying him around the world, and playing with all these famous people. And like for him, I kind of idolized him in a way, because like he just went straight into music. Like I don't think he actually went to college. I can't remember. I don't want to say anything bad about him. He's my dearest friend, but I don't think he went to college. He just completely went to music. And like I was like so envious of that in a way. I really wanted to do that, but my parents were like, you have to have a backup plan. You know, they were really kind of more conservative in a way, you know. And they're like, this music thing is not easy, you know. And they were telling me that at 18, 19, you know, and 20. And they were right, you know. I think they were right. And so like I didn't go full into music. I always had something else going on. You know, I went to college, then I went to grad school. You know, I worked. I never fully went into music until 2008 when I was 28, and uh, which is still, I guess, quite young in the grand scheme of things. But like, I spent a long time like doing all this other stuff and having like a main gig, right, and music as a side hustle kind of a thing. And but it's still, I still played hard. Like I would tour a lot, you know, sometimes for a long time, like the whole summer break I would go on tour. In fact, I almost didn't graduate grad school because of a tour. And there was this one teacher who didn't want me to graduate because he saw that I was touring in addition to playing music, and he almost tried to get me kicked out of the program. So I always felt like I had to lead this kind of weird double life, you know, like a secret agent or something.
So
Um,
what did you study in college and what did you get your master's in?
I have a bachelor's in of science from UC Berkeley, and I studied environmental science. And then I have a master's in landscape architecture from the University of Arizona. So I've done a lot of like,
Landscape architecture.
yeah, environmental kind of stuff. You know, I do
Wow.
like gardening and plants and stuff like that. You know,
Did you build your home that you're in or
no, I didn't build my home. I've often planted a lot of gardens, and I've worked on different permaculture farms and like ecological design. You know, but again, that sort of feels like a distant life to me. From there, I went into the solar industry and spent
okay.
6 years, you know, designing solar systems. So I have like a whole science background, you know, but to be honest, my first love was always music, like always music, uh, and I would always make time for music. But it wasn't until 2017 that I started doing music totally full time, and that's when I went completely full in, and I've been doing that ever since. So now it's 2024, so it's been about 7 years of just solid music. But it's funny because like here's where all the kind of crazy stories come in. Like I some people didn't even know that I had all these other jobs, right? Because I would tour so much, and like on the social media or whatever, they would see me on tour all the time. And like I would literally, I had a full-time job, but I would get off work on Friday, you know, go to the airport, fly to a gig, play a gig Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Sometimes I would come in on the airplane on Monday morning and go straight to the office, like with my instruments and go straight to work on Monday, you know, like, and like every piece of PTO and every holiday and everything, I was just out touring. I mean, so I literally was burning the candle at both ends. I had two full-time jobs, you know, and it was very stressful. Honestly, it was really difficult. And you know, I just was like, this can't go on this way. So I knew at some point I either had to go in one direction or the other. And I knew I wanted to do the music thing. So finally that went out, and then I became a musician full time.
So the transition that you're talking about here, I think for many individuals, they oftentimes hit this cross path as well, right?
Hmm.
They're very passionate about a certain industry or a certain talent that they have, but yet feel they need to be very practical, kind of like what your parents instilled in
Yeah.
you. You should finish university, get your degree. We're not sure about the musical path. You know, how are you going
Yeah.
to feed yourself and put a roof over your head? So I, for you, when you made that choice, like, was how long did it take you to be like, okay, I'm quitting my job, I'm saying bye to, you know, all that, and I'm gonna go full time into music. And at the same time, I know I'm throwing a few questions at you, but also at the same time, when you were living this double life, how did you juggle all that?
Well, the juggling was insane. I mean, I was just tired all the time. And I always thought I was going to get like fired at work. I always thought that like they were going to fire me because I was, half-assing it or whatever. I mean, I still worked hard, but I mean, it's you can only do so much that you have to sleep at night too, and it was hard. I don't look back on that period of time with the fondest of memories in that respect. But it was good in a way. I mean, it was a good training ground, and it also, in a weird way, like it was a surprisingly productive time. There is a certain benefit to having a limitation. Like for instance, if you have all day to do something, unless you maybe you're a really disciplined person, but a lot of times you kind of screw around and sort of wait till the end and procrastinate and then do it at the end. And I mean, we need to relax and relax as well. But if you work all day and then you only have an hour to do something at the end of the day, do a recording session, you just like hit it really hard and it really, you know, anyway, what I'm saying is it's like sometimes having those limitations like exerts a certain stress on you and you do get good results. I mean, some of my best recorded work happened during that period, but it was incredibly difficult. I mean, I don't know if I would ever want to do that again, but it was hard. But so your other question was about so yes, this is a really interesting thing about making that shift. I know a lot of people want to do that. I know there's not just one way to do it. I was just having this conversation with another friend, and so there was an inspiration for me. There was this really cool woman named Christine Adams. She's still a very cool person, and she is a belly dancer. She used to belly dance for this troupe called Fat Chance Belly Dance in San Francisco. They're very popular crew. And she did this thing called a sojourn of sorts, where she traveled around the world for 2 years. Like, just it had these wild adventures, just going from place to place. Like, she had so many stamps in her passport that they couldn't even find a place to put another stamp. Like, they had to put new pages in the passport. And so I was talking to her about this because I'm like, I kind of want to do something like that. And so she's like, well, what you do is instead of just like jumping off the cliff, you don't want to necessarily just jump off the cliff and just do it. You need to have like a ramp, like an exit ramp onto it. So have money in the bank, save some money. Don't do it with $0.
Great advice.
Unless unless you're really, really going to go for it, have some money in the backup plan in case it doesn't work, and then book it out, like approach it like it's a normal job, like make a plan, plan out 6 months of it and do it. And that's exactly what I did. My first big tour was in Australia. It was a 2-month tour of Australia, New Zealand, and then back to the United States to the West Coast at the end of the 2 months. And that's what started off this whole sojourn for me as being a musician. I'd saved some money. I'd exited from my job, and I just went and toured in Australia. And it was a fabulous experience, and that just got the ball rolling. And then people see you doing events, and it kind of snowballs from there. I think that first year, 2017, I played at like 23 festivals. I went to like 11 different countries. It was a big, huge year. I was just like raring to go. And I just went out and played it. I also had put all these pieces together. I'd made 2 albums at that point. I had done gigs. I'd played at a few local festivals. Like, I'd got my name out there a little bit. So I was like ready to do it. I wasn't starting completely from scratch. And music is a really tough game. You have to like spend a lot of time, unless you have like a viral hit or something like that. It takes a lot of building, of making connections and building with people and building your name, building your brand, building your sound, building your catalog. It's a lot of work. I mean, it's really, really, truly a lot of work. And, now I think in a weird way, it's like even harder, because the music industry keeps changing, the whole digital thing of the music industry. It feels like it's harder than ever to make money in the music industry right now. But touring is the main thing that artists do, and you got to go out and perform, and it's a hustle, it's a grind. But you have to love it. You really have to love it. Sometimes a lot of people ask me, should I go out and do music? And I'm like, no. I'm really sorry to say that, but I don't think you should. It's really hard, you know. I mean, Rick Rubin talks about that, how he's like, he has all these podcasts and stuff now where he's like, if you need to have another job to make money and do your creative art on the side, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, you know. And I think you just everyone has to figure out how to crack that nut, you know. And so like for me, it's just like mega diversifying, you know. Like you said before, I teach, I record, I perform, I do marketing, I work at a record label, I produce, you know. I can't even keep track of all the things I'm doing. I mean, it's like it's like insane, you know. But it's fun, it's fun. Music is really fun, you know. Composing, performing, teaching. So you just kind of keep all the balls in the air and follow your heart with that, you know.
And so at this point, are your parents cool with you
Or
doing
my
a
well,
full time?
I'm 43 years old, so I don't know if I that really really is the biggest consideration. But yeah, I know my parents like my music. They're cool
Oh,
with it.
that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And in terms of as a creative, like you said earlier, how do you find the time amidst all the things you are doing to create, right? Because
Yeah, it's a really good question.
like how do you find the time to sit down and be inspired, to be able to come up with new songs for your next album or
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the short answer is time. You need time. You really need time, and you need to just block that period off, you know, so that you don't have any stimulation or people calling you or distractions. You know, you have to turn off the phone first of all. That's what you have to do. Turn off the phone and close the computer, the email. Although sometimes we have to work on computer to compose, but turn off the internet. And yeah, I mean, you know, that's a whole discussion too, actually. You know, writer's block and creativity, and you know, that's a deep subject. I mean, once you really get into it, you know, you have to let the inspiration strike, and sometimes the inspiration strikes at weird times. You know, like there's, you know, famously, what I always carry around these like napkins and like write things on napkins or little scraps of paper. So I have these like kind of folders with all these random assortments of things that I've scribbled down on it. You know, like little notepads and stuff. And now I write on my phone. I use you know, notepad and voice memos and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, when the inspiration comes, you just have to like take it, and if you have a block, you just have to push through it somehow. But creativity is an interesting process. I mean, I think about it in a way like trying to fall asleep, right? Like it's hard to force yourself to fall asleep. You kind of just have to let it happen to you. You have to create the environment that's conducive to falling asleep, and then you can fall asleep. And like creativity is, in my experience, very similar. You have to create an environment that's conducive to creativity and have that spark of inspiration, and then it comes, you know. And sometimes you have to pray. You pray to God, please give me the inspiration. Pray to Saraswati, the different goddesses. It's a mystical process, you know. You can't control it.
mm. And in terms of since you've been on this path since 2017, you said, what were some of the many times you put yourself out there to go on tours or to join festivals or to play with others, and the amount of times you were said no, you know, and and like how do you because sometimes, and I don't know if this is the case for you, but maybe sometimes you often put yourself out there and you're sending these DMs, you're sending these inquiries, and one week after the other the answers are no, we don't have the budget for you, or no, blah blah blah. And how do you keep yourself going to be like, okay, well, I'm still gonna keep going at this, and not be like, oh, maybe I'm not as good. Like,
Wow, you're really, yeah. I
why
feel
are
like you're a
people not
musician.
giving me opportunities? So how do you as an individual um find that resilience to keep going at it, because like we said very early on in our intro, it's all about music and sharing music, but at the
Hmm.
same time, the reality of human beings and living in this world is we also need to again provide for ourselves. So there is that fine balance, right?
Hmm. Yeah, you have very good questions, Jen. I feel like you're either a musician or you've interviewed a lot of musicians because these are really poignant and insightful questions. Yeah, I saw a quote once that said a musician experiences more rejection in 1 year than most people experience in their entire lives. I don't know how true that really is, but it feels true sometimes. And God, I can remember so many times in my life where I just would get so frustrated, like sometimes even just straight up angry when people would reject me, and it would feel like the perfect place for me to play. And it would just really rattle me, and I would feel so rejected, again and again and again. It's really funny. I haven't actually felt that in a long time. Like lately, whenever somebody says no to me, I'm just like, thank God. Like, I need a freaking day off is what I need. So I'm happy now when people say no. I'm super happy. I, I don't have to get on a plane and fly somewhere. I can just stay home that weekend. So I feel like something has shifted. I haven't like made it. There was an interview on NPR the other day where a woman was a famous woman on Netflix or something. It's this big show, was saying like, so you arrived? Have you made it? And she's like, yes, I feel like I have. So I definitely at this moment right now, I don't feel like I've arrived and made it, but in a certain way, I do feel like I have made it through that period where that would bother me because it really doesn't. And I've gotten to a point now where I am getting, thank God, knock on wood, enough work that's just coming to me that I don't need to hustle quite so hard to get it. It seems like easier to get the bookings that I need to get, and they just sort of come to me. And I think it's a result of just doing this for so long. I mean, it is getting out into the atmosphere, my music, to a certain degree, and it's helpful. There was a very famous artist named Pandit Pran. He was one of the best Indian classical vocal singers to come to the United States in the 1970s. And someone asked him this great question. They're like, "Do you want to be famous?" And he had this great answer. He said, "Only enough to keep working." And I thought that was so insightful because, like, that's exactly what we need as musicians. That's literally exactly what we need. We need enough name recognition so that we can work and get the gigs that we want and not starve and not be homeless. And, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not saying that it's bad to be famous or anything, but, you know, um, I don't necessarily want that, and I'd be happy just to have enough to just be able to keep doing my thing. And in a way, I feel like I've already gotten that. So so I'm happy. I'm happy with that. And I think there was one moment when I had this epiphany, and I was talking to an artist who I used to love to play with. I still love to play with her, but we used to play a lot together. And she said, I have to work with another artist on this gig. And I'm like, that's totally fine. And she said, Joss, I love that about you, that like when I need to work with someone else, you're just easy about it. It makes it much easier to work with you. And I realized that that's like a really good thing. You don't want to put too much pressure on the situation. Like, you don't want to be desperate. You don't want to be struggling. You don't want, it's just, that's not a good energy. It's not a good look. You want to be confident. You want to be strong. Even if you don't feel that way, you've got to project that. And that's what it is to be a musician. Like back to my thing where people would ask me if they want to be a musician, and I said, "Don't, no, you don't want to be a musician." It's not that I'm trying to convince people not to be a musician. I just think that you need to, if you really want to live this lifestyle, you have to have a certain mentality. You have to have a certain constitution and like flow about the way you live. You really have to trust. It has to be like a very trust. If you're the kind of person that wants a paycheck to hit 2 times a month and like have a stable place to live and like have all this, like, no, just don't do it unless you get a cushy job, I don't know what it is anymore, like as a composer or something, or a teacher, music teacher. Music is a very dynamic lifestyle. It's an incredibly dynamic lifestyle, and if you're cool with that and that the way that flows, the ebb and the flow of that, then some people like that, and that's the interesting thing is that everyone is different, like everyone wants a different thing. Some people want stability. Some people want dynamism. Some people even want like chaos. They thrive. Like I'm not like that, but I know people that thrive in chaos. They like that kind of chaotic experience and different things. And so we're all very unique. Humans are like very unique, and each one needs a different thing. And you can't assume that because one person likes this, the other person likes that. It's just really not like that.
Mm.
So that's my long answer for that question.
Yeah, no, it's very helpful, I think, and very insightful, coming from someone who's actually lived it and done the hard work, and where you are now. And like you said, it's shifting times for you, which is exciting because
Yeah.
life is impermanent, and you have to be open minded to the different changes. Um,
Hmm.
so we are running short on time, so I would like to wrap up a little bit.
Yeah.
I usually have three questions to end my conversations with my guests. So the first one I'll ask you is, what keeps you grounded?
Hmm. I'd say nature. I really like being in nature, and I particularly love surfing. I really like to surf and be in the ocean. Um, so yeah, just really unplugging, spending time in nature. That's the main thing to ground me.
So do you surf every day?
If there's waves, I try and surf every day. But yeah, it's hard to surf every day. I have surfed every day. There was a time where I surfed every day for 3 months.
Wow.
Commitment. There was a famous guy named Dale Webster who surfed every day for like 7 years in California. He's like a legendary guy. It's funny you say, oh, surf every day, but like actually when you get down to it, like think about it, when you're sick, when it's cold, when it's stormy, it's not actually an easy thing to do. But it shows
No,
love,
it's not.
shows the love for it. I love being in the ocean. I love the water and the animals and the elements and the tides, and it connects you to that ancient vibration of nature.
Mm, very nice. Okay, what 2 cent would you give to those listening to this episode, who resonate with your storyline? Oh, or another way I put this question is, what would you tell your younger self what you know now?
I would tell my younger self to like don't get so worked up about all the ins and outs of things, like the rejections, the day to day, it's not the end of the world. Each day is not the end of the world. Especially when we're young, sometimes it can feel like you lose one battle and it's like, and it just, everything comes crumbling down. It's just roll with it more. And the other thing I would say is don't burn bridges. Like really, really, really don't. If you're in a musician or a creative field, like just don't do it. Don't cut someone off. If you can handle it. And it's hard though. There's a lot of passion and big personalities and stuff, and sometimes you can't maintain a relationship, but at least you know end it on a positive note if it has to end. You know what I mean? And
Mm,
that's something that's really served me really well. You can't always do it. I mean, that's the strange thing, is like you try and be a really good person and never have that. But humans are very dynamic, and and sometimes the personalities just clash. So that's what I would say.
okay. And what resources would you recommend? And it could be books, it could be podcasts, it could be fellow musicians, music that you listen to that has helped you along the way? So for instance, when you were sharing with us how there was a period of time where you felt like you were living two lives, and
Mm.
you were really, really stretched yourself. Were there things that you referred to that helped you, along the way? You know how some people might have like these books that they read that really helped them, or like a podcast they listened to, or a mentor, uh, that you would, if someone came up to you and was sharing like, oh, I'm like juggling three jobs, but like I really want to do
Uh-huh.
this. And you'd be like, oh, read this book, or like listen to this podcast. Like it really helped me. I think it might be helpful for you, kind of thing. So those kind of
Yeah,
discussions.
yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I mean, that's actually a pretty big question. It seems simple, like what resource would you share, but it sort of depends on what you're trying to look for. I mean, it's so vast, if you're talking about the actual art of music or the practice of music or the business of music or the, you know, whatever it is. I mean, I would kind of answer the question in a slightly different direction and go like, for me, music is like spiritual, right? Like that's kind of the underlying thrust of it. That there's something deeper than the actual act of it that keeps me coming back for more with music, and it's that vibration thing, So it's like whatever it is that what I would say is that whatever it is that got you to love the thing in the first place, like you need to like keep that in your mind and like keep reminding yourself like what was the reason why you love it, you know what I mean? And then all the resources and stuff can come from that, but just yeah, I mean, let that be your guiding star is the goal. And then the interesting thing is that your goal may change, like when you're 20 you have one goal, and then when you're 30 you have another goal, when you're 40 you have another goal, and so it's like, and there may be a through line there, but it will change the reason why you're doing what you're doing. And so just to keep, like, the resource really is yourself, right? That's where it is. The resource is yourself. You need to check back in with yourself and be like, am I on the right path? And don't just keep doing something just because you're doing it. Maybe you need to do a giant pivot, and maybe it's not working, and be honest with yourself about that. If it's not working, be like, well, what's the next thing to do? And so, yeah, that's my sideways answer to your question.
No, it's so good. I actually haven't had anyone answer it in this way, but this is great. So thank you for being the first. Um, So I will provide your website, your Spotify playlist, and other information on the episode resources link below, so people
Hmm.
can follow you or reach out. I don't know if you have any other questions or things you want to comment on before we say farewell. I just want to thank you for making time to come and share your journey with us. So thank you very
I
much.
really enjoyed it. It was a pleasure, and you're a wonderful conversationalist. I feel like I want to interview you next time and ask you all these great questions and hear what you have to say.
Okay, maybe next time. Thank you, Joss.
Thank you, Jen.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects. For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired, and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.